I never thought I'd be one of those men telling a story like this. You know the kind. The older guy who talks slowly, sips his coffee like it's the answer to everything. But here I am, 61 years old, alone in a rented studio apartment with boxes I still haven't unpacked. And this is the story of how my wife and I, after nearly 3 decades of marriage, decided to let go. We weren't dramatic people. No door slamming, no betrayals, just time, just life. We met in our 20s, both stumbling into adulthood with a blend of optimism and panic. She had a laugh that lit up the room. I was the quiet one who wrote poems and I love you notes on little scraps of paper. Somehow it worked. For years, it really worked. We built a life together, careers, a modest home in the suburbs, and 2 grown kids who now live states away. We had routines, inside jokes, vacations to the very same beach every year. We had love, or at least something close enough to it that we didn't question it, at least not at first. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the threads began to fray. Conversations became transactional. Laughter faded. We were more roommates than lovers, more co owners of a life than participants in it. Still, we held on, because that's what you do, right? You stay, you try, you tell yourself it's just a phase. But one afternoon, sitting across from each other with the silence thicker than ever, she said it before I could. I think we're done. And I nodded in response, because I'd been feeling it too. It's a strange thing to grieve a marriage that didn't end in chaos or cruelty, but in peace, in mutual understanding, in quiet sadness. That was the beginning of the end, or maybe the start of something else entirely. I think the hardest part was realizing there wasn't one moment to blame. No affair, no screaming match, no explosive betrayal, just a collection of quiet days, 1,000 silences, and then finally the sound of acceptance. We'd been living in parallel lives for years. Even during dinner, our words skimmed the surface. How was work? How was traffic? Did you water the garden? But we really weren't seeing each other. I sometimes caught myself staring at her, trying to remember the last time we kissed with passion, or the last time she reached for my hand. She still smiled at me sometimes, and I still took out the trash without being asked. We weren't unkind, just attached, like we were sharing a house with a kind stranger. I remember the day we spoke the truth out loud. It was a Sunday afternoon as the rain drizzled across the patio. She was folding laundry, and I was trying to read a book that I'd already read 3 times, just for the distraction. Then she said it, without even turning around. Are you happy, Clayton? I didn't answer right away. I didn't think I asked myself that in a long time. But when I did, I told her the truth. No, not really. Are you? She shook her head at me in response. Not for a while now. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't cold. It was just the truth. We spent the rest of that week sitting with the idea. We didn't announce anything. We didn't pack bags. We just let the thought of separation settle in the room, like dust. And then we began to talk about what it might look like, divorcing without destroying each other. We decided upon no lawyers unless it got complicated. We talked through everything. We protect each other's dignity. That's what mattered to both of us. We might not have love left in the way we used to, but we still had respect for each other, and that counted for something. We told the kids over a video call. When we did, our daughter cried, and our son just looked stunned. But they understood. They both said we deserved to be happy, and that helped at least a little. The day we filled out the divorce paperwork, I watched her sign her name like she'd done 1,000 times on birthday cards, mortgage forms, and school permission slips. But this time it felt like a final signature on a chapter, kind of like a quiet closing. We both cried and held each other afterwards, not because it wasn't the right decision, but because sometimes, even when you let go gently, it still leaves a bruise. The phrase division of assets sounds sterile, like a legal footnote in a courtroom drama. But when it's your life being divided up, it feels a lot less like numbers and a lot more like grief. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one we'd bought when the kids were toddlers. The wood still faintly scratched from their homework pencils and spilled juice boxes. Now it held spreadsheets, envelopes, and a laptop blinking with bank accounts and retirement funds. We tried to be fair to each other. That was a promise we made, kindness above all. But even kindness doesn't shield you from the strange ache of itemizing your life like it's inventory. This couch, it should probably stay with the house, I said one night, trying to sound casual. She nodded at me and said, yeah, that makes sense. It did make sense, all the sense in the world, but it still stung. The house wasn't even a question. She wanted to stay. That had been clear from the beginning. It was the home she'd poured her soul into, the garden she nurtured, the sunroom she read in every morning, the porch where she kept wind chimes that I always said were too loud, but she loved it, and honestly, I couldn't imagine living there without her. Still, agreeing to give it up felt like cutting off one of my hands. I could get by without one, but it was still part of me. I built the back deck with my brother. I painted every damn wall more times than I could count, and we had celebrated every Christmas there while watching our kids grow up in that house. My entire adult life was stored in those walls. But I walked away, because holding on would have meant fighting, and I didn't want that to be our last chapter. We sold the extra car we rarely used and split the value. The family SUV went to her. She needed it more. And I kept the beat-up old Honda. I found myself getting sentimental over it even though it was the same car I used to curse. Bank accounts were a lot easier. We had joint savings and separate checking. We divided things neatly. She took most of the savings since she was staying in the house and keeping the higher mortgage. I kept a greater share of my pension and 401k to make up for my share of the house. We worked through it like two exhausted accountants, trying not to think too much about what the numbers represented. But it wasn't the finances that cut me deepest. It was the little things. Who gets the wedding album? What about the ugly clay bowl our daughter made in the second grade? The Christmas ornaments. How about the old vinyl collection we used to dance to in our 20s? Things like those have no price. Some nights I couldn't sleep. I'd lie in the guest room, which was my now temporary room, while the divorce was ongoing, and listen to her footsteps down the hall. Those same footsteps I heard for 30 years. I wonder if I should have fought harder for some things. Not out of spite, but out of the quiet panic that I was losing everything that ever mattered. I moved out 2 months after the papers were finalized. The day I left, we stood on the porch looking at each other uncomfortably. We didn't hug, we didn't cry. We just looked at each other like two travelers going in different directions at the same train station. Take care of yourself, she said. You too, I replied. It was awkward because we used to be lovers, and now it did not even seem like we were friends. I didn't cry when I handed over the keys to the house as I thought I would. I expected I might even fall apart right there on the front porch, but I didn't. I just stood there, keys resting in my palm before handing them to her. And like that, she quickly turned around, leaving me facing a closed door. The realism of my situation then fell upon me as I stood there for a few seconds, and I could only walk away. That was it. I pulled away from the curb with a small U-Haul full of boxed up memories and a lump in my throat that didn't dissolve for weeks. The place I moved into was fine for the moment. It was a studio apartment on the edge of town. It was near where new construction was commencing, and I thought it'd be a good start. Nothing fancy, as I had no idea of my finances and what I could really afford. It had white walls and beige vinyl plank floors. It came furnished, thank goodness, with generic art nailed to the drywall by someone I'd never met, and cheap big box store furniture. It wasn't a home, it was a space, a blank one. The first night I sat in a chair in the living room eating leftovers out of a styrofoam container. The chair had a permanent dip in it from someone I guess who had spent a great deal of time in it, and I'm sure he was carrying a few extra pounds due to the depth of the dip. The landlord said another older single male had moved out the month before, and I imagined him to be a victim of the same circumstances I was facing. I meant to unpack, but I just stared at the boxes. Each one felt like a time capsule I wasn't ready to open. I didn't bring much with me, just a few books, some clothes, my tools, a coffee maker, and our 75-inch flat screen we had purchased at an after-Christmas sale the year before. A man must have his priorities, even if it had to rest on 3 milk crates and lean against the wall. I didn't want any other furniture from our home. It just didn't feel right taking what we had picked out together. I figured I'd start over, but clean slates are lonely. Everyone talks about the freedom of starting fresh, but they don't talk about the echo in an empty room, or the silence when no one else is brushing their teeth next to you before bed, or how you can go an entire day without speaking out loud. I tried to keep busy. I fixed a broken cabinet. I replaced light bulbs, rearranged the sparse furniture I had. I made lists, groceries, things to buy, things to do. But the list didn't quiet the ache. The truth was, I missed her. Not romantically, not exactly, but I missed the way she used to hum when she cooked. I missed our routines. I missed being known. That's something I didn't expect. After a divorce, people talk about losing love, but what hit me harder was losing a witness to my life, the best and the worst of it. And now, she was gone. No one knew what time I liked to wake up on Sundays. No one noticed when I had a bad day. No one asked. One night, about a month in, I sat on my balcony with a beer and stared at the stars. And I let it hit me, all of it. The loneliness, the fear, the strange, painful peace of knowing we'd made the right choice, even if it still hurt like hell. But the stars were still out. The world kept turning, and somewhere deep down, I knew I'd learned to live in this new chapter. I just hadn't figured it out yet. You don't realize how married you were until you're not. It's not just the wedding ring, or the title, or the shared tax returns. It's the way your life folds itself around another person like roots tangled underground, inseparable until they're ripped apart. After I moved into my place, the silence was unbearable. It wasn't peaceful. It was oppressive. Every creak in the walls echoed like a question I didn't want to answer. I tried to keep in touch with people, texted the kids, called my brother once a week, but I quickly realized how small my social circle had become. Most of my friends were still married, busy, tied up with grandkids and retirement trips, and they didn't quite know what to say to a newly divorced man in his 60s. They'd offer awkward sympathies, then shift the conversation to sports or the weather. I didn't blame them. I was a ghost of their greatest fear, a reminder that even long marriages could come crashing to an end. I got invited to dinner once by an old friend of ours. It was well-meaning, but sitting across from them, watching the way they passed dishes and finished each other's stories, was like an open wound to me. I left early after saying I wasn't feeling well. That part was true. Most of the time I stayed in. Weekends stretched long, and I binged-watched shows that I didn't care about. I wandered hardware stores just to feel like I had somewhere to be. I tried to go to a local community center once for a men's coffee hour. Everyone there was either 10 years older than me or talking about their prostate. I felt too young to be this old, too old to start over. There were nights I thought about reaching out to her, not because I wanted her back, but because she was the only one who understood this grief. But I didn't. I didn't want to interrupt her healing with mine. Loneliness, I've learned, is its own kind of grief. It doesn't just visit you in the evenings. It lingers in the mornings when you wake up when no one says good morning. It sits across from you at dinner. It's your silent passenger. I thought this was an appropriate saying because I felt as if the loneliness was killing me each day. But, and this is important, it doesn't stay forever. At least it hasn't for me. Because little by little, things started shifting. I started exercising. I couldn't even bend over and touch the floor when I started, but because of yoga, I can now bend in positions I never thought possible. I picked up books I never had time to read. I joined a class at the local library. Creative memoir writing, of all things. That's how I started telling this story, just a paragraph at a time. For the first time in a long time, I started to feel something that wasn't sadness. I felt present, and I felt that I mattered. Healing didn't happen all at once. It crept in the way spring does, quiet, unnoticed, and then suddenly everything's green. At first, it was tiny things. I started waking up without that hollow feeling in my chest. I began cooking meals instead of heating up frozen dinners. I even bought a plant, just one, and to my surprise, I kept it alive. The memoir class turned out to be more than I expected. Most of the other people were older like me, widowers, retirees, and one woman who used to write jingles for a radio station. We sat in a circle once a week and read pieces of our lives to strangers who slowly became something else, people who listened to us. One day I read aloud for the first time that I'd fixed the leaky sink in our old house and how proud I'd been when it didn't flood. I remember that story got a laugh, a real one. And after class, a woman named Lorraine patted me on the shoulder and said, "You're a better storyteller than you think." I didn't realize how much I missed being seen by someone. I also started doing small things like taking my bike out of storage. The tires were flat, but I got them fixed and I started cycling on weekends. Not far, not fast, but enough to feel the wind in my hair and remember that my body still worked. I cleaned up my wardrobe and threw out all my old clothes. I bought new jeans and shirts from a clothing store versus the bins in a big box store that are next to the lawn furniture and the 5-gallon containers of mayonnaise. My daughter even noticed this during a visit and said, "Dad, you look good." I hadn't heard that in a while, and it meant more to me than I've ever let on. Slowly, I felt lighter over time as my self-induced pressure was being lifted off me. I wasn't trying to be someone new. I was remembering who I was before my marriage consumed everything, before the routines and the responsibilities hardened around me like cement. I found old hobbies. I played guitar again. I watched foreign films with subtitles and didn't even fall asleep. I even learned how to make a decent risotto. I still miss her sometimes. That doesn't go away. But the missing didn't feel sharp anymore. It's more like a soft ache, the kind you can live with, the kind that lets you move forward. I didn't think I'd ever date again. That world felt foreign. Apps, bios, what are you looking for? Messages typed out like job interviews. I used to joke that the only swipe I did was with a debit card. But after a while, curiosity crept in. It wasn't desperation. It wasn't loneliness either. Not anymore. It was something else, a quiet longing to share my life again, to tell someone about my day, to cook a dinner for two. I signed up for a dating site. I filled out the profile with the help of my daughter, who insisted I delete my dad jokes, although I left one in it anyway, about duct tape and fixing hearts. I figured if someone laughs, she was my kind of person. I didn't jump into anything. Mostly I just messaged back and forth with a few women, all of them divorced, widowed, or just looking for some type of friendship. One woman and I bonded over our mutual hatred of leaf blowers. Another shared a passion for old jazz records. I haven't met any of them yet, but we talk and it just feels good to do that with a woman again. You know what? It's not about finding the one. I'm trying to recapture what I had. I'm just open to coffee, open to conversation, and maybe open to companionship. There's a quiet thrill in that. I've come to believe that love in your latter years isn't about fireworks. It's about warmth. A soft chair beside the fireplace, a gentle knowing, a laugh that finds a way into your chest and settles in for the winter. I don't know what's ahead for me, but for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid of it. There is still music left in me. There are sunrises I haven't watched, jokes I haven't told, and meals yet to be shared. And maybe, just maybe, a hand waiting to hold mine again. And that's enough to keep me going. If you're still watching, I want to thank Clayton for his story. I know this hasn't been one of the flashiest stories ever. There's no scandal, no plot twist, just the slowly unraveling of a life shared and the quiet courage it takes to begin again. Divorce at this age, it's not just an ending, it's a reckoning. A mirror held up at every version of yourself you've ever been. It's the moment you realize that you've got years ahead of you and no script to follow. But that's the gift too, because once the dust settles, you get to choose. Choose who you are. Choose what matters. Choose who you let into this next part of your life. Make peace with yourself. Don't carry anger. Don't carry regret. Just gratitude. Gratitude for what you had and for the strength to let go. If you're going through something like this, whether you're freshly separated, long divorced, or just feeling stuck, I hope Clayton's story gave you something. Not advice, not solutions, just a voice saying, others have been there and you're not alone. If this story meant something to you, share it, leave a comment, subscribe. I publish stories from other men like you and me who've been to the bottom of that hole and climbed out. You can send me your story and your comments to talkingdivorceafterwife@yahoo.com. See you in the next one.